From F1 to WRC, and from Le Mans to Formula Drift. Motorsports are now on the chopping block. That's right, the EPA is waging an all-out war against car culture with what they're calling the National Compliance Initiative. Could this mean the end of American car culture for good? Well, let's not lose hope just yet, because in our corner, we have our champion, SEMA. But are they strong enough to be taking on the EPA? Well, let's dive into exactly what SEMA is doing to save our race cars, and how it could stop the EPA from ripping off our bolt-ons. And if you're new here, I'm Brad Danger, this is Ideal. Please subscribe and turn on that notification bell, and buckle up, because this is how the EPA is trying to ban car mods. Let's go. So if you somehow wandered onto this channel and you're not a car guy, first of all, what the hell are you doing here?
Why are you running?
And second, you should know that American car culture is about way more than just getting a factory spec Mustang and showing it off to your friends. Modding cars has been the central of American car scenes for decades, and it really separates us from a lot of other countries. And that's because a lot of countries have very strict rules on what you can and can't do with your car. America is all about freedom. It's practically in our Bill of Rights. Well, it's not, but it should be. And this is why people all over the world are obsessed about American car culture. From the cherry paint classics of the 50s and 60s to our anti-lag poppin', flame spittin', turbocharging tuner cars of today. But now, with the EPA waging war on SEMA and aftermarket part manufacturers, you might not be able to find any of these parts in just a few short years. In case you didn't know, SEMA stands for Special Equipment Market Association, and they're basically the champion of American aftermarket. They hold trade shows for small businesses to showcase their aftermarket offerings, as well as host one of the largest custom car shows in existence, the iconic Las Vegas SEMA show. And they help protect enthusiasts' right to modify their cars. Now, they've been demonized by the EPA, who paint them as a group of evil villains hell-bent on destroying the environment. Listen, we here at Ideal absolutely love the environment as much as the next person. And yes, want the air to be as clean as possible. But by banning aftermarket parts, that's bullshit. The EPA would basically be wiping the American car culture off the face of the earth, not to mention destroying the multi-billion-dollar industry that the aftermarket represents. On top of that, if the aftermarket disappears, it would effectively kill off motorsports altogether, since really the only people that would be able to build race cars would be multi-million-dollar race teams.
Oh no!
Motorsports should be accessible to the average Joe. Think about it this way. How would we ever have another LeBron James if it became illegal for kids to play basketball? Motorsports and modifications are at the very heart of American car culture, and it's what has separated us from the pack on the global stage. The EPA has announced that it has become a top priority to rid the streets of all high-performance parts, including screws, snails, and pipes. And we're not talking about just cars that you can drive on the street. The EPA even wants it to be illegal for you to build your own race car in your garage. Yeah, absurd. Now, I can understand if the EPA would go against people deleting their cats or straight piping their daily driver. Catalytic converters are very important for protecting our air quality. But making it illegal to supercharge a dedicated race car that's driven only at the track? Now, that just makes zero sense to me. And the EPA is trying to use the Clean Air Act, you know, the law that allows them to set standards for vehicle emissions and require automotive manufacturers to include emission control devices on their vehicles. Now, the EPA wants to expand the scope of the Clean Air Act to make it illegal to tamper with those control devices in any way, and to ban the manufacture or sale of defective devices, or basically any aftermarket parts that adds horsepower. And if you want a taste of what these laws can do on a national level, just look at our friends over in California. The CARB laws have turned basically every tuner and car nut into a criminal. What the EPA wants to do is way worse than even that. And this isn't the first time they've tried to do something like this. You see, back in 2016, they tried to enforce a similar interpretation of the Clean Air Act. But luckily, the Racing Enthusiasts and Suppliers Coalition went to court with them, and allowed us to keep our race cars for another couple of years. So this time around, what can we do to make sure the EPA doesn't end American car culture for good? Well, luckily, when it comes to protecting motorsports, all hope is not lost. The enthusiast community with SEMA at the forefront is trying to push the RPM Act through Congress. The RPM Act, which is the perfect name for a bill about high revving race cars, actually stands for the Recognizing the Protection of Motorsports Act and is meant to push back against the EPA's hatred on cars. No, the act does not protect your right to drive tuned Subies around on public roads, only to drive the car on track for competition purposes. I know that a lot of you watching this may have performance mods on your street car, but that's a fight for another day. And just remember, your vote counts, and you have the power to vote for laws that will protect your right to repair and modify. Modifying cars for track use, however, is an American tradition that has spanned more than 100 years and really has a negligible environmental impact. I mean, just think about drag racing. The whole race only lasts a couple of seconds. And no, I am not a scientist, but I don't think that you can cause serious environmental damage in a race that lasts all of 7 seconds. Even in California, where they've notoriously had the strictest emission standards, race cars for track use are exempt from those emission standards because they're forced to recognize that motorsports are a serious hobby for a whole bunch of people. And we are just really fortunate that agencies like the NHRA have really deep pockets and strong lobbies, so that they're able to keep the NIMBYs away from the track. However, the EPA's enforcement of the Clean Air Act would be a national campaign, meaning that regardless of what state laws are, the EPA could shut down aftermarket manufacturers everywhere in the country, unless, of course, we get the RPM Act passed through Congress, and that would protect the rights of aftermarket part manufacturers. And that'll allow them to continue to make badass mods for us enthusiasts and keep modified cars on the track. So what can you do and what can I do to make sure that the RPM Act gets passed? Well, get ready to start clicking, because after you subscribe and turn on that notification bell, if you want to make sure the RPM Act gets passed and it saves American car culture for many generations after us, click the link down in the description and let the elected officials in your state know that you don't want the aftermarket shut down. I think if you're watching this channel, you probably don't want to see American car culture or motorsports go down the drain. So head over to the site, sign up, and make it so that everybody can tune a Dodge SRT4 to 1 billion horsepower, and then take it to the track and tear a hole in the pavement. And let's keep it that way. So what do you think of this whole dispute? Do you think the EPA has a point in trying to ban performance mods, or do you think that they're just totally full of it? Let us know in the comments down below. And also, if you enjoyed this vid, please hit the like button. My name's Brad Danger, this is Ideal, and keep living the ideal lifestyle.